The cuffs dug into my wrists, heat rolling off the hood like a skillet, and the sergeant leaned in so close I could count the coffee on his breath as he whispered, "These are our streets." I stared right through the glare into the eye of a teenager's phone, lifted my chin and said, "Then watch this very carefully." The badge came up the whole block, forgot how to breathe, and for a heartbeat even the cicadas went quiet. I didn't wake up planning to be the guy at the center of a viral mess. I woke up planning to be invisible like I'd been for 3 months. Gray tee busted jeans, a 2010 beater with paint like chalk, a wallet full of a life that wasn't mine, but fit like a hand-me-down, and a mission that felt heavier every time I added another name to the stack misses. Evelyn Park with the piano teacher's wrists and a bandage across her brow because she supposedly matched a 20-year-old male burglar, Tyrese Hall, with an honor roll smile and a skull fracture over a taillight that worked fine when the garage checked it. Caleb Turner, who left part of his leg in Helmand and then got charged with loitering because he read a paperback outside the VA. You read enough reports like that, and the anger stops flashing hot and starts cooling into something sharper, quieter, steel you carry in your chest so you can speak without shaking. Hawthorne Drive in Brookside looks like a postcard. If you crop it tight, trimmed hedges, wine chimes, sensible sedans, neighbors who practice not seeing one another until they have to. And that day my Civic coughed. Once coughed again, then bled steam from under the hood. Temperature needle redlined, and before I could pop the latch, I felt the first cruiser roll up slow, then stop hard, like it had drawn a bead on me. I didn't need to see Sergeant Randall Pike to feel him. Some men bring a storm with them and talk like they invented thunder. And when he climbed out, I could already hear the script I'd read 100 times dominate first, justify later. "License and registration," he barked. "Know how you doing, no car. Okay, just the voice people use on a dog they don't like." I moved slow because that's how you stay alive in certain uniforms and in certain skins. Hands open, narrating every reach. "Car overheated, sir, calling a tow." And he snapped, "Didn't ask about your car, asked for your ID." So I handed him Jordan Wells, the alias. A construction odd jobs backstory that said I was tired and broke and easy to bend. He smirked like he knew me, like he knew all of me. Then he raised his voice about a convenience store robbery that hadn't happened. And the neighbor 2 porches down heard every word. Yeah, that happened. The made-up probable cause the theater built for people who need a reason to nod. His shadow officer, Evan Crowley, walked the slow circle with one hand near his holster, the way rookies do when they want the camera to notice them. "Hands on the hood," he said, and the metal was so hot it felt like it might brand me right through the skin. Pike watched the sweat bead at my brow and asked if it was nerves or heat. I said, "Same sun you're standing in." And that twitch at his jaw told me I was now the disrespect he needed to fix the pat-down. Got mean at the 15-second mark, fingers jabbing ribs and kidneys like he was looking for a fight instead of a weapon. Then my phone was in his hand and he was staring at the home screen like that gave him the Fourth Amendment password, he said. And I said, "You don't need my password." And he turned me a little so his guys could see the show. You hear him telling me what I don't need. There was a green hoodie across the street. A kid half tucked behind a maple with her phone steady like a tripod. Later I'd learned she was Tasha Green, 17, the one who reads policy to grown men at school board meetings. And the corner Petromax had 2 smoked domes pointed right at us. I counted angles while I kept my voice clear so every microphone could pick up the words that mattered. Hector Mendez went for the passenger side door like it owed him money and called out with the practiced surprise of a stage magician. "Sergeant, you'll never guess what I found." And up came a little bag of white powder that had been under my seat for exactly as long as his hand had been under my seat. I looked at the gas station camera, then at Tasha's lens and said, just loud enough to carry, "That's interesting because I watched you plant that 4 minutes ago. This block has better video than Netflix." You could feel the air change the hush before weather breaks. Screen doors creaked. A neighbor muttered, "Oh my God," into her palm. Pike sent Crowley toward the girl with the phone like he was ordering takeout, and Crowley got to the sidewalk and remembered pensions are real. So he pivoted back to me and started stacking charges, like bricks, suspicious behavior, resisting, disrespecting an officer. "We got plenty," he said. And I said, "I invoke my right to remain silent and my right to an attorney, clear and slow, because when it's time to teach the tape, you teach it." And then Pike hit me. Not a punch, more of a backhand for the audience. And for a second my cheek buzzed and 2 porches gasped at the same time. Then his fingers pressed my throat just enough to make the little animal inside my chest want to claw at him. And I didn't, because my training sits on that animal like a bigger animal with better judgment. "See these streets," he whispered. "They listen when I talk. You people come here and learn who runs what." And I caught my breath and said, "It's 96 degrees. Everyone is sweating, even tyrants. Because sometimes humor is a plank you walk across a bad moment." He didn't laugh. "Split yourself in two, that's what this work requires." One version of me felt the sting and the heat and the old memory of my father's hands at 10 and 2 while he explained how to narrate a traffic stop to stay alive. The other version wrote a list in my head: warrantless search, fabricated robbery, planted evidence, assault under color of law. And in that split, I thought of Mrs. Park pressing a gauze pad to her forehead with those careful teacher hands. I thought of Tyrese's mother counting shallow breaths at 2 a.m. I thought of Caleb staring at a blank ceiling that had seen more prayers than paint. And I knew the plan was done. Sometimes a plan ends itself because the truth arrives early and louder than you expected it to. "Sergeant Pike," I said, chin up so he had to see my eyes, "before you add one more lie to your list, there's something you need to know." He smiled, because men like that always smile right before the ground goes. "What's that?" "Wells." I moved slow, chest pocket fingers visible to the whole block. "I'm reaching for my identification, my real identification." Crowley snorted. "He's cuffed what ID?" And that's when I pinched the leather, flipped it with a little wrist I'd practiced in a mirror, and let the badge catch the sun. "Detective Jordan Reed, West Haven Police Department, Internal Affairs Division, Case 24-1N97. I said, every syllable nailed to the air. "For 3 months we've documented this unit's illegal stops, evidence, plants, deprivation of rights under color of law, and conspiracy to defraud the public. Sergeant Pike, you and your crew are under arrest." And for one wild second time bent. Crowley shuffled back like the light might burn him. Mendez froze above that baggie like it had turned to fire. A woman on the corner said, "Oh my God," very softly, then said it again, for the neighbors who hadn't heard. Pike tried to laugh, and the sound came out like a chair scraping tile. "Internal Affairs doesn't do undercover," he said. And I said, "You're being recorded from 4 angles, including mine, and the Petromax, also. Hello Tasha's followers, my captain and federal partners appreciate your service." You know what I mean? The digital hum got louder like a hive. Sirens, again different pitch. Unmarked sedans and 2 clean cruisers. Agent Lauren Cho stepping out in a navy blazer, like the answer to a question the block had been asking for years. "Detective Reed, you secure," she said. And I said, "Secure and ready to transfer custody." And then all at once it wasn't their show anymore. "Sergeant Randall Pike, you are under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights, deprivation of rights under color of law, tampering with evidence, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." And hearing a Miranda you've heard 1,000 times land on the man who just told you he owned the pavement is a whole different scripture. Mendez twitched toward the planted bag, and I said, "Don't even think about touching that. Every move is another charge." Crowley cracked right down the middle, breath going too fast. "My kids, my wife, I can't." He said, eyes skittering, and he looked at me like I might pull a lever that opened daylight. "Start with the truth," I told him. "It's lighter to carry." Tasha stepped closer without crossing the line, voice shaking with courage. She wasn't even old enough to vote with. "We are watching history, you guys," she told her live. "This time they picked a man who makes cases, not plea deals. And that one line, I'll be hearing it in quiet rooms for the rest of my life." After that comes the part. The news loves the montage with boxes and seals and men in windbreakers. The 9th Precinct evidence room had a false wall like a cheap magic trick, and behind it, a little museum of emergencies. Baggies and pipes and burner phone scales that had never seen a legitimate inventory sheet. 5 years of ready to be discovered, lying in wait for the next unlucky driver. The accountants walked in with spreadsheets that looked like crossword puzzles and walked out with a map of cash that didn't match anybody's paycheck side. Money that flowed in neat tides right before charges were dropped or complaints went missing. Some of the names on the deposits belonged to a city clerk and a part-time prosecutor with a new boat, a bail bondsman whose luck never seemed to run out. You get the idea. Rot doesn't stay polite and keep to one room. The calls to the victims were the only part that felt like oxygen, IA told Mrs. Park. She would not be asked again to perform her pain for a committee that apologized for her perception of harm. Tyrese watched his charges vanish, and his mom sent me a photo of the first full night of sleep she'd had since the hospital. The VA hired a liaison with teeth, so the next Caleb who reads outside a clinic gets help instead of cuffs. I'm not naive, Those calls don't fix a decade in a day, they unlock the first of many doors. But when Mrs. Park said, "Thank you for believing me," with a tone that belonged in a recital hall and not a deposition room, that did something to my bones. Trials jam months of quiet work into weeks of theater. Pike's lawyer tried to lacquer him as a misunderstood guardian and me as an overzealous trap setter. The jury watched Petromax footage that didn't blink. Tasha's live stream turned into an exhibit with chain of custody thicker than a family Bible. The accountant with the steady voice walked them through 52 deposits totaling $308,000 of income that had never seen a tax form. Crowley folded for 11, Mendez for 14. Pike sat there with a face like a locked door until the judge read 24 years, and even then he tried to stare me into a different outcome. The gavel fell. Some people said too much. Others said not enough, and I said to myself, good. Let them argue. Argument means the room is finally awake. Promotions sound shiny if you say them quick in practice. I got a small office where the coffee tastes like wet cardboard and a whiteboard that never stays white. A handful of young investigators who still believe being invisible doesn't mean being voiceless, and a calendar full of meetings with groups who were documenting what happened long before we showed up. Body cams went from accessory to policy with teeth. The Civilian Review Board got a budget big enough to matter. A sergeant in another precinct learned the hard way that "search it because I said so" is career poison now. And you better believe I slept better that night than he did. People ask me what it felt like in the exact second I raised the badge cuff's tight sun in my eyes and a man telling me he owned the sidewalk. I tell them it felt like being 12 in the passenger seat while my dad whispered, "Keep your hands visible and say what you're doing before you do it." It felt like the weight of every case file name pressing into the small of my back saying, "Do not waste me." And if I'm honest with you, it felt a little like revenge trying to put on justice's coat, and I have to keep those two apart like bleach and coffee, because mixed together they'll kill you. Justice has to be boring on paper so it can be brave in a crowd. Hawthorne sounds different now. There's a small plaque in the concrete that says, "On this spot the truth got loud." Kids hop it like a game. The Petromax owner waves and says business is better because folks don't flinch when a cruiser parks at pump 3. Tyrese sent me his freshman photo and wrote, "Law or journalism, still deciding, Mrs." Park recorded herself playing a polonaise and sent it to the office because the piano finally sounded like relief again. Caleb wears dress blues to graduations at the VA and tells younger vets eyes level that sometimes the most patriotic thing you can do is demand the country live up to its paperwork. And yes, 2 towns over. Another name sits in another file, and the slope of human nature still tilts the same way if you don't build guardrails. But more decent officers are saying no in rooms that used to be very quiet. A kid I mentored called to say he reported his sergeant for ordering a trunk search without consent. He sounded scared. He also sounded free. Pike looked back at me as they walked him to the car and said, "You made enemies today." I told him I made room. He didn't get it. It wasn't for him. It was for the people on those porches who had learned to watch with their doors cracked, for the girl with the steady hands, who filmed when a man twice her size told her to stop, for my father in a memory with his hands at 10 and 2, for the part of me that believes we can build places where a badge means protection instead of permission. So here's the part where I ask you something and I want you to sit with it for a second. If the only way to catch a corrupt unit is to let them show you who they are in real time, is that entrapment or accountability? If a man sees a camera and still lies with his whole chest while choking a handcuffed person who he thinks is powerless, who exactly is trapping who? And if a city learns its own truth because a teenager refused to lower a phone on a public sidewalk, what does that say about who actually polices what? You don't have to agree with me, but stay in the room and argue like grown folks. I'll end where I began. The cuffs were tight, the hood was hot. A man told me the street was his. He was wrong. It belongs to the mailboxes and the kids on scooters and the piano teachers and the basketball players and the veterans reading paperbacks in the sun. It belongs to the girl who filmed and the neighbor who finally said, "I saw," and the officer who wrote it up the right way when nobody was watching it. Belongs to all of us, which means the work of keeping it honest is all of ours too. And yeah, that happened. We flipped the script on Hawthorne and the truth got loud enough to echo. If you're still here, I want to hear you. Was I right to flash the badge when I did? Or should I have let the night run longer to stack more charges? Have you ever watched a stop you knew was wrong and stayed quiet? Or did you speak? Where do you think the line really sits between tough policing and corruption? Drop your city, your story, your take hit. Subscribe if you want more stories told by people who lived them and not by whoever wrote the press release. And if you've got a truth on your block that needs to get loud, my comments are open. Make it loud.